Actors, we've all got issues, so let's talk about them. I'm your host, Juan Ayala, and this is Actors with Issues. Hello, ladies, gents, and non-binary friends, and welcome to another episode of Actors with Issues, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of entertainment with special guests from TV, film, and Broadway. I'm your host, Juan Ayala, and today I am joined by an actor of stage and screen. You know and love him from Ugly Betty, Single All the Way, Younger, Broadway's A Spam-A-Lot, and Once Upon a Mattress, and his Critics' Choice nominated role of Brian in the Apple TV Plus series Shrinking. It's Michael Urie. Michael, thank you so much for being here. Such a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. Wow, that was a really nice intro. Thanks, Juan.
So before we dive into all of those credits that we just sprinkled in, I'm curious, was there a particular moment or performance you saw growing up that really motivated you to become an actor, or was that always just sort of innately in you that you knew you wanted to perform?
If you ask my parents, they would say I was always performing, but I was very shy and very nervous. We moved when I was like 6 in the middle of a school year, which is always
Mm,
weird,
yeah.
and I really went into my shell after we moved, and it took a while for me to kind of come out of it. But I loved, and so I didn't. I had a few friends, but I played alone a lot, and I loved movies. And when I was 9, when I was 8 years old, Beetlejuice came out, and then when
Mm,
I was 9, Batman came out, and
right.
I saw Michael Keaton do these two in completely different performances.
Yeah.
That was kind of when I was like, oh, I get what acting is.
Mm,
Or I didn't really get it, but I saw what an actor like was.
yeah.
And I knew that they were both directed by the same guy and that he also directed Pee-wee. And I just sort of put this all together when I was like 9 years old. And I think that was when I was and then for a long time, I thought I wanted to be a director, a movie director, because I
Mm,
idolized Tim Burton. But I think the real takeaway from those performances was Michael Keaton and
yeah.
knowing that an actor could be a person who is Beetlejuice, and then the next year is Batman. And I think, yeah, so I think that was a really big one. And then cut to when I was in high school, there was a touring production of How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, the
Mm,
Broadway musical, starring Ralph Macchio,
really?
and
Yeah.
as the villain Bud Frump, Roger Bart, who is now, like an incredible Tony Award winning musical theater actor. Then he was, and then he was incredible too. And I saw him just tear the stage up in this great role of a villain. And I said, and I, like I wasn't a very musical person. I couldn't really dance. I could, like, I didn't. I knew that I wasn't going to be in musicals like Phantom of the Opera or A Chorus Line, because I couldn't really sing or dance. But then I saw, I saw Roger Bart play Bud Frump, and I was like, oh, I could sing like that. I could move like that. And I thought maybe I'll be in a musical someday. And so that really gave me the inspiration to, well, first of all, I chased that role down. And when they revived it in 2010 or 11, I ended up getting to play that part.
Mhm.
And that was my Broadway debut. But it was really like seeing him in that show on tour through Dallas. That was like I really saw like a stage animal, really like tear up the stage.
Yeah. And can we just talk about those two full circle moments? Because you got to do a movie with Michael Keaton eventually,
Yes,
and you play the role on Broadway. Like, come on, that's
I
beautiful.
know.
I love when things like that happen. The universe is a beautiful thing when it does that, you know?
It is crazy how that. Yeah, I mean, I will say I chased down How to Succeed, but the Michael Keaton thing, that was like I couldn't believe it
Yeah.
when that fell into my lap. I mean, I auditioned. I made an audition for that movie, and and I was so like I couldn't. I was like, it's such a good part. It's such a great role, and all my scenes are with him,
Mm,
and they're all really really good scenes. And I got to spend several days on set with him, and he was so cool and so exciting to work with. He's such a good actor. I mean, in this movie, unlike a Beetlejuice or a Batman, it was very real, very realistic,
right.
a naturalistic movie. And he's so real that you didn't know when he was acting or not.
Yeah. When
He
it
was
started,
that,
when it's soft, yeah.
yeah, like it was so he was so good that like like everything was usable. So anytime, and I had to like learn very quickly, like, oh, they're gonna use like I better be good every time because everything he does is usable. And it was thrilling. He's such an amazing. I didn't tell him any of that stuff when I worked with him.
Yeah,
Uh, but he is a very special actor, and it was
yeah.
very cool.
And like many folks, I first saw you in Ugly Betty, and just loved that show so much. I grew up watching the original Colombian series Betty
Oh,
la Fea,
yeah.
and I just love what they did with with the American version, and seeing your character and Justin's character. It just meant a lot to me as a kid growing up, very closeted little boy. So, and looking back, I'm curious, like, what would you say was your biggest takeaway from that experience?
Oh my gosh, there were so many. I think the biggest takeaway was probably it was probably working professionally on a set. Um, because at that point I guess I was 20, I think I was 25 when we shot the pilot.
Mm.
And I had been on very few sets, a couple of commercials, I think one other pilot, maybe an indie movie. I didn't know like what it was, what being on set was. And working with uh, Vanessa over and over, Vanessa Williams over and over and over again. She was such a pro and so good about being a leader. And with her fame, she was like really
Yeah,
famous and still is, of
yeah,
course. Like it was so, watching her navigate that and navigate publicists and fans and red carpets and things like that. I learned so much about that, but also just like being on set and being a leader and then also from Judith Light and Tony Plana, who played
right,
Betty's dad,
yeah,
and Eric Mabius, who'd done a lot of stuff at that point. And America, even though America was younger than I was and hadn't done that much, she immediately became, she was a born leader,
yeah,
and of course became skyrocketed to fame as soon as that show she became. But I learned so much from her about being a professional and being and not that I was unprofessional, but there was just like so much I didn't know. Like I knew about acting, but I didn't know about the business of television
right.
or business of like the whole other side of like selling a show and promoting a show and doing interviews and I learned so much from and then like how to treat people and how to like the crew works so hard
Yeah,
on a television show. I mean, much harder than the actors because their hours are they're there all day,
yeah,
and so working with these um, other vets and then someone like America who's such a natural like we really knew how to treat everyone like a family and it
mm,
became a family and yeah I mean I think that would probably be, that was my biggest takeaway was how to be a professional
yeah.
on a TV set.
Yeah, that's definitely, that those aren't things that they really teach you. You can go to the most like prestigious schools, which you did, obviously. But there's no sort of like course called like I booked it, now what? That you're like
No,
learning
there's not.
what's a
No,
call
we
sheet, what's a 10-1, what's a, all that stuff.
yeah,
There's just so much to learn. Like once you get on set, it's like, okay, I know my acting, I know the lines, but there's a whole, like you said, the business side and
yeah.
just the professionalism of it all. And, you've got a killer monologue and great lines, but there's so much more.
And I was, because Becky Newton, who was on Ugly Betty with me, and I became like best friends immediately, and we had so much together on the show. We learned together, and she taught me because she knew even less than I did, because she'd really mostly done commercials,
Mm,
so it was her. So I knew how to like act, and she had been and she had been like on screen more than I had, but we were both learning the ropes of television, and she really taught me the importance of knowing what you don't know.
mm,
Uh, it's so valuable. It's actually there's like great power in knowing what you don't know, and asking.
yeah,
And like a lot of times we're afraid to ask. This is such a prideful country. We're so afraid to ask, but like that's actually really powerful. And asking somebody for advice is very empowering.
and getting into shrinking. Firstly, congrats on season two so far. Congrats on season three renewal. So excited to see, what's coming up. For and of course, you've been with the show for a couple years now. There was the strike right in the middle of it. And with just a few episodes left of this season, as at the time of our recording, what are you most looking forward to for fans to see, and what are maybe some hopes for season three?
Um, well, I have made it a point not to try to guess what they're gonna write because I'm always wrong, and it's always way better than I think they're gonna come up with. They're such talented writers. Um, but what I think the thing that I'm so excited about and most proud of with the show uh is that is this sort of chosen family thing that's
Mm.
going on. Like these people, we're all different on the show. No two characters are the same on Shrinking. Um, and you're seeing us paired up or in little trios or even like when we're all together and there's a special chemistry when you put two of these characters together that's like really exciting and special and new and different and I now have gotten to work with everybody on the show. They've done all the combos.
Yeah.
And what I want is more of that. So this season, I was so happy to get to work with Lukita as Alice. Had a great storyline between Brian and Alice,
Mm.
and the drunk driver, played by Brett Goldstein. And that was a relationship that I was so curious about from season one, because he's known her since she was a baby. Like his relationship with Jimmy predates her or her mother.
Cool.
And I thought that's a really special relationship that we didn't get to see very much of in season one. And so to get to like, and they're so good at like jumping in the middle of something. So we didn't need to set up who they are to each other. We know who they are. The writers expect a lot of the audience. The audience has to be paying attention, which I think is
Yeah.
really great. We don't spend half the show with backstory with like
Right.
laying pipe, as they say. We expect you to catch up, and it's actually great. I think it makes people pay more attention because there's a lot of TV that, and I get it, and I get like TV, sometimes TV is not made for your prime focus. Sometimes TV is something that we're doing in addition to other things. And so you have to remind people who relationships are. But
Yeah.
this show is so good at asking the audience to lean in and really take part and imagine what's not said. And so the story I have with Alice this season was so wonderful, I'm so thrilled with it. So what I'm really hoping for is now I've got my sights set on Luke Tenney, who plays Sean. We have a little bit in this season, and there's a little bit coming up that I won't spoil, but um, he's such an incredible actor, and I think that's a really interesting relationship. So I'm hoping that Sean and Brian have some stuff together. I don't know what it would be. I wouldn't presume to speculate or pitch, but I think that there could be some really as the show does so well, funny and poignant stuff between those two
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah, that's something that trio, Bill and Brett, and the names are escaping me
It's
right now, but
Brett and Jason, yeah.
yes, yes, yes. But they, just do so well of that, like, hilarious but poignant. By the end of some episodes, you're like, why am I crying? Like, it's genuinely, you're just like, wait a minute, wait a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do that so
Sometimes in
well.
the same moments.
Yeah,
It's funny and heartbreaking at the same time.
yeah.
It's very good.
We're gonna get into some fan questions for our little segment called From the Fans, and these are Reddit usernames, so some of them are pretty hilarious. Fictional Bandit asks, in the Paley panel, Michael touched a little bit on TV acting, being a lot more committing the lines to short-term memory versus long-term memory in theater. With the get away from this family monologue, you sort of talked about how there were different approaches to that because it was such a long piece and you had to do it more than once. The fictional bandit asks, what is your process like for memorization and performance for moments like that?
Thank you for asking, Fictional Bandit. Um, very interesting question, and that was something that I had never done before. I never had a big monologue on television before,
Mm,
and then never, and certainly never one that I would be asked to repeat um, again. So with that particular monologue, knowing that it would be repeated, and knowing that we'd want to, like have plenty of takes where it works, meaning I can't just get it right once.
right.
We need to I need to be able to get it right more than one take. And I knew for morale on the day, as a colleague of the 100 plus person crew, I knew that the prospect of an actor having a long monologue could be scary. I mean, like anything that's not easy to shoot. Um, and so I knew personally for myself and for like everyone that was going to be working that day, like I want to make everyone comfortable. I want everyone to know that I've got this. So I really wanted to be uber prepared. Um, and and I wanted to know that in a few weeks when I do it again, it's still there. So I guess that's sort of what I meant by this long-term versus short-term thing. Um, because it's the difference between knowing it well enough to be able to act it spontaneously and knowing it well enough to be able to make it look like you're acting it
Right.
spontaneous. And so this is one of those confessions that we practice. This is a real, like we do this in
Yeah.
life. We have something that's going to be hard to say. I mean, I do it. We practice it at home, in the car, in front of a mirror. We practice like, how am I going to say this impossible thing? So it's very believable to me that Brian practiced it in his mirror or
Right.
in his car. And so when it was time to say it, it was a little bit it was a little bit rehearsed.
Right.
So I spent a lot of time with it, with the material alone, rehearsed on my own a lot, and and I also kind of I would rehearse it physically. So it wasn't just like drilling the words, so I knew the words backwards and forwards. I had planned physically what I was going to
Right.
do, kind of. I had it in my body. It wasn't just I guess that maybe that's an easier way to say the difference between long term and short term is when you learn something short term, you learn the words and the ideas and you know what they mean and you know how to say them. But when it's long term, like when we do in theater, it becomes physical. It's actually part of your muscle memory.
Right.
And your body sometimes knows what it is before your brain does. I mean, it happens to me in the theater all the time. It happens every time you're doing a play, especially like the one I'm in right now. It's been 5 months of doing this play, and sometimes my body knows what's next before my brain does because it's like it's so ingrained in me, and it's dangerous. Like sometimes like, your mind wanders. Now I think about something else or something's a little bit different, and I'm like, "Huh, that was different," but my body's still going forward and doing the show. So it was a really cool. I mean, that model I'll never forget getting a monologue on television like that. That was cool.
Yeah. And our final question, we ask this every episode. In 10 words or less, what advice would you give to a young actor?
Always prepare more than you think you need to.
Awesome. Well, Michael, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for such a wonderful show, wonderful performance, and I cannot wait for season three. And congrats on your nomination. If you attend, I'll be there as a member. So
Hey,
hope to meet
oh,
you
I'm
there if you're
going.
there. All right.
Oh, I'm
Awesome.
going.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to Actors with Issues on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and visit our YouTube channel for full video interviews. Actors with Issues is executive produced and hosted by Juan Ayala. See you next time.